The alarm went off at 0600 hours, just like every other morning. Tae-min rolled out of his narrow bunk and rubbed his eyes. The metal walls of his quarters on Repair Station 17 were cold to the touch. He had lived here for 15 years now, ever since he left Earth to find work among the stars. Ji-woo was already awake, making coffee in their small kitchen area. She smiled at him as he walked in. They had been together for 5 years, both engineers working on this lonely station at the edge of human space. The station orbited New Busan, a colony world that mined rare metals from nearby asteroids. "Big day today," Ji-woo said, handing him a cup. 3 transport ships coming in for repairs." Tae-min nodded and sipped the hot coffee. It was synthetic, grown in the station's hydroponics bay, but it tasted close enough to the real thing. He had stopped missing Earth a long time ago. The frontier suited him. Out here, things broke all the time, and people needed engineers who could fix them. The station had a crew of 47 humans. Dong-hyun was the supervisor, a gruff old man who had been in space longer than anyone else. He ran the repair bays with strict efficiency. If you did good work, he left you alone. If you messed up, everyone heard about it. Tae-min had earned Dong-hyun's respect years ago. He could fix almost anything: mining drones, transport engines, life support systems, navigation arrays. Other engineers followed the manuals. Tae-min understood how things actually worked. He could look at a broken machine and see what it needed, even if that meant doing things the manual said not to do. The morning started normal. Tae-min worked on a transport ship's coolant system. The pipes had cracked from too many jumps through hyperspace. He welded new sections and rerouted the flow. Simple work, but it kept the station running and credits flowing in. Then everything changed. The emergency channel crackled to life across the entire station. Every screen, every speaker, every communication device lit up at once. Tae-min had never seen that happen before. It meant someone very important needed help. "This is the Imperial Flagship, Eternal Dominion," a cold voice said, in perfect galactic standard. "We require immediate assistance. Our primary fusion matrix has failed. Repeat. We require immediate assistance." The repair bay went silent. Everyone stopped working and stared at the screens. The Volthrene Empire had ruled the galaxy for 12,000 years. Their technology was so advanced that most species couldn't understand it, much less repair it. The Volthrene themselves were tall, reptilian beings with scales that shimmered in blues and greens. They looked down on other species, especially humans. To them, humanity was young and primitive. The Eternal Dominion was the Emperor's personal flagship. It was the most advanced ship in the entire Imperial fleet, and now it was broken. Dong-hyun's face appeared on the bay's main screen. He looked pale. "Listen up, everyone. The Imperial flagship is stranded 2 hours from our position. Their fusion core is dead. They're asking if anyone can help." Someone laughed nervously. "They want us to fix a Volthrene ship? That's impossible." "I know," Dong-hyun said. "I already told them we can't help. But they're desperate. The Emperor himself is on board. The nearest Imperial repair facility is 6 weeks away." Tae-min felt his heart beating faster. He looked at the technical readout on his screen. The Eternal Dominion was broadcasting basic diagnostics. The fusion matrix was completely fractured. According to Volthrene engineering standards, it was irreparable without a complete replacement. But Tae-min had fixed irreparable things before. "I'll do it," he said quietly. The entire bay turned to look at him. Ji-woo grabbed his arm. "Tae-min, no. You can't fix that. Nobody can." "I want to try," he said. Dong-hyun's voice came through sharp and clear. "Tae-min, get to my office, now." The supervisor's office was cramped and messy, filled with old manuals and broken equipment parts that Dong-hyun kept meaning to throw away. The old man looked at Tae-min with concern in his eyes. "You're serious about this?" he asked. "Yes, sir. Do you understand what you're volunteering for? The Volthrene hate asking for help, especially from humans. They'll treat you like dirt, and if you fail, They might blame you for their problems. I understand. Dong-hyun leaned back in his chair. Why do you want to do this? Tae-min thought about it for a moment. Because everyone thinks it's impossible. But maybe it's only impossible the way they're thinking about it. Maybe there's another way. The old man studied him for a long time. Then he nodded slowly. You've never let me down, kid. If anyone can pull off a miracle, it's you. But I'm sending HFY with you. She's studied Valthrine systems more than anyone else here. You'll need her knowledge. HFY was a young engineer, only 25 years old, but she was brilliant. She had spent 3 years analyzing Valthrine technology, writing papers about their engineering philosophy. Most people thought she was wasting her time. Now that knowledge might save the Emperor. 2 hours later, Tae-min and HFY boarded a small shuttle. Ji-woo came to see them off. She hugged Tae-min tightly. Come back to me, she whispered. I will, he promised. The shuttle flew through the black space toward the massive ship floating dead ahead. The Eternal Dominion was 3 kilometers long, covered in silver plating that reflected starlight like a mirror. It was beautiful and terrible at the same time, a monument to Valthrine power and pride. As they approached, Tae-min felt small. This ship represented everything the galaxy thought humans could never achieve. Advanced technology, ancient wisdom, perfect engineering. But perfect engineering had failed, and now they needed human help. The shuttle docked with a soft clunk. Tae-min picked up his toolbox. It was old and battered, filled with equipment he had collected over 15 years. Nothing fancy, nothing expensive, just tools that worked. HFY carried her data tablet, filled with every piece of information she had ever gathered about Valthrine systems. Her hands shook slightly. Tae-min put a hand on her shoulder. We can do this, he said. The airlock opened. On the other side stood 3 Valthrine warriors in ceremonial armor. They were nearly 3 meters tall, their scales gleaming in the ship's soft lighting. They looked at the 2 humans with barely hidden contempt. You are the engineers? One of them asked. His voice was deep and cold. Yes, Tae-min said. Take us to your fusion matrix. The warrior's eyes narrowed. For a moment, Tae-min thought he might refuse. Then the Valthrine turned and walked down the corridor. Follow me. Do not touch anything. Do not speak to anyone. You are here on sufferance, human. Remember that. Tae-min and HFY followed the warriors through the ship. The corridors were enormous, built for beings much larger than humans. Everything was smooth and perfect. Not a scratch or dent anywhere. The walls glowed with soft blue light. The air smelled strange, like ozone, and something else Tae-min couldn't identify. They passed Valthrine crew members who stopped and stared. Some whispered to each other. Tae-min heard the words, primitive. He ignored them and kept walking. He had a job to do, the impossible job that everyone said couldn't be done. But Tae-min had built his entire career on doing the impossible. The engineering section of the Eternal Dominion was massive. Tae-min had worked on big ships before, but nothing like this. The fusion matrix chamber was the size of a small building, filled with crystalline structures that glowed faintly even in their broken state. The air hummed with residual energy. Commander Velthus stood waiting for them. He was older than the warriors, his scales darker and marked with scars from decades of service. His eyes were sharp and intelligent, but they looked at Tae-min with the same contempt as everyone else on the ship. You are the human engineer? Velthus asked. I am. This is HFY, my assistant. The commander made a sound that might have been a laugh. An assistant. How quaint. I have 17 master engineers on this ship, all trained in the finest academies of the Empire. None of them can repair this damage. What makes you think you can succeed where they have failed? Tae-min set down his toolbox. May I examine the matrix? Velthus gestured dismissively. By all means. Waste your time. When you fail, at least you can say you tried. Tae-min approached the fusion matrix carefully. It was beautiful, even broken. The crystal core was held in a magnetic suspension field, surrounded by cooling systems and power regulators. The crystal itself was fractured in multiple places, dark cracks running through what should have been flawless material. HFY pulled out her scanner and started taking readings. She whispered to Taemin, "The quantum structure is completely destabilized. According to their engineering principles, this can't be repaired. Only replaced." "I know," Taemin said quietly. "But replacement parts are 6 weeks away." He walked around the entire chamber, studying every angle. The Valthrine engineers watched him with expressions that ranged from curiosity to disdain. He could hear them whispering among themselves, "Look at him. He doesn't even understand what he's looking at. The human carries tools in a box. Like a primitive. This is a waste of time. We should have waited for proper parts." Taemin ignored them all. He had learned a long time ago that people often underestimated him. He was shorter than most humans. Thin and unimpressive. He wore old coveralls and carried a battered toolbox. Nothing about him looked special, but his mind worked differently than others. He could see patterns and connections that other people missed. After 2 hours of examination, he sat down on the deck and closed his eyes. HFY sat next to him. The Valthrine engineers muttered among themselves, thinking he had given up already, but Taemin was thinking. He was running simulations in his mind, testing ideas, discarding what wouldn't work. The problem was obvious. The fusion matrix was designed to be perfect. Every component had to work at exactly the right specifications. If anything was wrong, even slightly, the whole system would fail. The Valthrine had built their technology on the principle of absolute precision. That was their weakness. Human technology was different. Humans built things that could tolerate imperfection, systems that could adapt and compensate, machines that worked even when damaged. What if he could make the Valthrine system work like a human system? He opened his eyes and looked at HFY. "Can you access their power grid specifications?" She nodded and pulled up the data on her tablet. Taemin studied the numbers, his mind racing. "It's possible," he said quietly. "It's dangerous, and it breaks every rule in their engineering manual. But it's possible." HFY's eyes widened. "You found a way?" "Maybe. I need to test something first." He stood up and walked back to Commander Velthus. "I need access to your secondary power grid and your magnetic containment systems." The commander's scales rippled with what might have been amusement. "For what purpose?" "I'm going to create a bypass system. The fusion matrix doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs to be balanced." Velthus stared at him. "That is nonsense. The matrix requires precise quantum alignment. There is no such thing as good enough. In fusion engineering. In Valthrine fusion engineering, maybe," Taemin said. "But human fusion systems work on different principles. We use adaptive harmonics. The system balances itself. Humans have inferior fusion technology," another engineer said sharply. "Your systems are crude and inefficient." "Yes," Taemin agreed. "But they work even when damaged." "That's the point." Velthus was silent for a long moment. Then he said, "If you damage the matrix further, the Emperor will hear of it. If I do nothing, the Emperor sits in a dead ship for 6 weeks, Taemin replied. "At least let me try." The commander's eyes narrowed. Then he nodded slowly. "You have 3 days. If you fail, you will leave this ship and never speak of this again. Is that clear?" "Clear," Taemin said. The work began immediately. Taemin and HFY worked 18-hour days. They barely slept, eating ration bars while they worked. The Valthrine engineers watched them constantly, waiting for them to fail. The first step was mapping the damage. Every crack, every fracture, every point where the quantum structure had collapsed. HFY's scanners recorded everything in precise detail. The second step was building the bypass. Taemin rerouted power from the secondary grid, creating a network of magnetic fields around the damaged crystal. The Valthrine engineers said it would never work. The fields would interfere with each other and cause catastrophic failure. But Taemin adjusted each field individually, creating a pattern that compensated for the damage. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't elegant, but it was functional. On the second day, He started the most dangerous part. He needed to reconnect the broken pathways inside the crystal. Valthrine engineers would have used precision tools and taken weeks to do it correctly. Taemin used carbon nanowire from his toolbox, threading it through the cracks by hand. "This is insane," one of the Valthrine engineers said. "You're contaminating the quantum matrix with primitive materials." Uh, uh, I'm giving it a structure to hold on to," Taemin replied, not looking up from his work. His hands were steady as he threaded another wire. "The crystal wants to resonate. It just needs help finding the right frequency." Haewon helped him calculate the resonance patterns. She was brilliant with numbers, finding mathematical relationships in the chaos of the broken crystal. Together, they created a map of intentional imperfections, each one designed to balance against the damage. The Valthrine engineers thought they were crazy, but they kept watching. On the third day, Taemin was ready. He had barely slept in 72 hours. His hands shook from exhaustion and too much coffee. Haewon looked just as tired, but her eyes were bright with excitement. Commander Velthus stood in the chamber with a dozen other officers. Word had spread through the ship. Everyone wanted to see if the human would succeed or fail spectacularly. "This is your final attempt?" Velthus asked. "Yes," Taemin said. He stood at the control panel, his hand hovering over the activation switch. "When I activate this, one of two things will happen. Either the matrix will stabilize and power will return, or it will explode and kill everyone in this chamber." The Valthrine officers stepped back slightly. Velthus didn't move. "Those are poor odds. Human. They're better than sitting in a dead ship for 6 weeks, Taemin said. He looked at Haewon. She nodded. They had checked everything 3 times. The math was right. The connections were solid. It should work. Should. Taemin took a deep breath and activated the bypass. For 3 seconds, nothing happened. Then the crystal began to glow. Faintly at first, then brighter. The magnetic fields hummed to life. Power readings started climbing on the displays. Then the whole system started shaking. Alarms blared. The crystal flared with unstable energy. "It's failing," a Valthrine engineer shouted. But Taemin was already moving. He adjusted the magnetic fields, fine-tuning the resonance. Haewon called out numbers, and he plugged them into the system. The shaking smoothed out. The alarms quieted. The crystal's glow became steady and strong. Power flooded through the eternal dominion. Lights came on throughout the ship. Systems that had been dark for weeks suddenly blazed to life. The fusion matrix wasn't perfect, but it was working. It was working. Commander Velthus stared at the readings in disbelief. Around him, the Valthrine engineers stood in shocked silence. Taemin allowed himself a small smile. Then exhaustion hit him, and his legs gave out. Haewon caught him before he fell. Taemin woke up in a bed that was far too large for him. The ceiling above him was decorated with intricate patterns that seemed to move in the soft light. For a moment, he couldn't remember where he was. Then everything came back. The fusion matrix, the repair, the moment when power had returned to the eternal dominion. He sat up slowly. His body ached from 3 days of non-stop work. Someone had dressed him in clean clothes while he slept. Not his old coveralls, but soft fabric that felt expensive against his skin. The door opened, and Haewon walked in carrying a tray of food. She looked rested, her hair clean and pulled back. She smiled when she saw him awake. "You slept for 16 hours, she said. "I thought you might sleep for a week." "Where are we?" Taemin asked. "Guest quarters. The fancy ones, apparently reserved for visiting dignitaries." She set the tray down on a small table. "Eat. You need food." The meal was strange. Alien fruits he didn't recognize. Some kind of protein that tasted like fish but wasn't. And a warm drink that reminded him of tea. But it was good. And he was hungry. "What happened after I passed out?" he asked between bites. Haewon sat down across from him. "Everything changed. The ship is fully operational now. All systems are running at 90% capacity." Commander Velthus ran diagnostics for 8 hours straight. He couldn't believe it. None of them could. And the Emperor? No one's seen him yet. But the whole ship is talking about what you did. The Valthrine crew doesn't know how to react. Some of them are angry. They think it's shameful that a human succeeded where they failed. Others are curious. They want to understand how you did it. Taemin finished eating and stood up. I need to check on the fusion matrix. Make sure it's stable. Already done, Haewon said. I've been monitoring it every hour. The balance is holding. Your adaptive harmonics are working perfectly. The crystal has actually started to self-repair in some areas. It's using the structure you gave it as a template. That made Taemin smile. It was exactly what he had hoped would happen. Give the system a pattern to follow, and let it fix itself. A chime sounded at the door. Haewon answered it and stepped back quickly. Commander Velthus entered the room. He looked different somehow. Less hostile. More thoughtful. The human engineer is awake, Velthus said. It wasn't a question. I am, Taemin replied. Is there a problem with the matrix? No. It continues to operate within acceptable parameters. Better than acceptable. Actually. Efficiency is climbing as the crystal adapts to your modifications. The commander paused. I have been an engineer for 43 years. I have studied at the finest academies in the Empire. I have designed ships and weapons and power systems that lesser species cannot comprehend. And yesterday, I watched you solve a problem I declared impossible. Taemin didn't know what to say to that. Velthus continued. I came to tell you that the Emperor wishes to meet you. He has ordered the ship to return to the capital world. You and your companion will be brought before the throne of 1,000 suns. Haewon's eyes went wide. Taemin felt his stomach tighten. The capital world. The heart of the Valthrine Empire. No human had ever been invited there before. When? Taemin asked. We depart in 3 hours. The journey will take 5 days. Velthus turned to leave, then stopped. Human. What you did. The bypass system and the adaptive harmonics. May I study your work? Of course, Taemin said. I'll write up a full technical report. The commander's scales rippled in what might have been surprise or respect. Then he left without another word. The next 5 days passed in a blur. The Eternal Dominion traveled through hyperspace toward the capital. Taemin and Haewon spent their time writing reports and answering questions from curious Valthrine engineers. Word of the repair had spread throughout the ship, and opinions were divided. Some engineers wanted to learn from Taemin. They asked detailed questions about human engineering philosophy, about how he had approached the problem. These conversations were fascinating. Taemin discovered that many younger Valthrine engineers were frustrated with the rigid rules they had been taught. They wanted permission to think differently. Other engineers refused to speak to him at all. They saw his success as an insult to Valthrine superiority. One senior engineer named Cathrix confronted him in a corridor. You got lucky, Cathrix said, his voice sharp. Any fool can break the rules and sometimes get a result. True engineering requires discipline and precision. I agree, Taemin said calmly. But sometimes discipline means knowing when to break your own rules. Cathrix had walked away angry, but Taemin noticed he wasn't the only one who had heard the exchange. Several younger engineers had been listening, and they looked thoughtful. On the 5th day, they arrived at the capital world. Taemin stood at an observation window and stared in awe. The planet was covered in massive cities that glowed with light. Orbital stations surrounded it like a crown. Ships of every size moved in perfect patterns through the traffic lanes. This was the center of an empire that had ruled the galaxy for 12,000 years. A shuttle took them down to the surface. Taemin caught glimpses of impossible architecture through the windows. Buildings that seemed to defy gravity. Gardens that floated in the air. Statues of ancient emperors carved from single pieces of crystal that were hundreds of meters tall. They landed in a plaza outside the Imperial Palace. The palace itself was beyond description. It was carved from a mountain of white stone, covered in gold and precious metals. decorated with artwork from 1,000 different worlds. Just looking at it made Taemin feel small and insignificant. Guards escorted them inside. Not the warriors from the ship, but elite Imperial guards in armor that seemed to be made of liquid metal. They didn't speak, just led the way through corridors filled with artwork and history. Ji-woo was waiting in one of the antechambers. Taemin's heart jumped when he saw her. She ran to him, and they held each other tightly. "They brought me here 3 days ago," she said, "along with Dong-hyun and some others from the station. No one would tell me what was happening. Are you okay? Did they hurt you?" "I'm fine," Taemin assured her. "Better than fine. I fixed their ship. I heard." "Everyone's heard. Taemin, you're famous. The whole galaxy is talking about the human who repaired the Emperor's flagship." "Ah." Dong-hyun walked over, his old face creased with worry. "Kid, what did you get yourself into? This is bigger than I thought. The Emperor himself wants to see you." "I know," Taemin said. "Do you understand what that means? Emperors don't meet with random engineers. Something's happening here. Something big." Before Taemin could respond, a court official appeared. She was Valthrine but smaller than the others, wearing robes of deep blue. "The Emperor will see you now. Follow me. All of you." They walked through more corridors until they reached a massive set of doors. The doors opened silently, revealing a throne room that took Taemin's breath away. The room was enormous. The ceiling was so high it disappeared into shadows. Columns lined the walls, each one carved from a different precious stone. The floor was polished to a mirror shine. And at the far end, raised on a platform of pure crystal, sat the throne of 1,000 suns. Emperor Thraxion sat on that throne. He was ancient, his scales pale with age, but his eyes were sharp and clear. He wore robes of silver and gold, and on his head sat a crown that seemed to be made of frozen starlight. The throne room was filled with people. Valthrine nobles in their finest clothes, military commanders in decorated armor, representatives from dozens of alien species. Everyone who mattered in the Empire was here. They had all come to see what the Emperor would do with the human who had fixed the impossible. Taemin walked forward with Hye-won, Ji-woo, and Dong-hyun beside him. His heart pounded. His mouth was dry. He had never been so nervous in his life. The court official announced them. Presenting Taemin, human engineer, Hye-won, human technician, and their companions. Emperor Thraxion studied them in silence. The entire throne room waited. Taemin could hear his own heartbeat in his ears. Then the Emperor spoke. His voice was old but strong, carrying easily through the massive chamber. "Taemin of humanity, you have done something unprecedented. You have repaired what our finest engineers declared irreparable. You have saved our flagship and proven that innovation can come from unexpected places. For this, you have earned our gratitude." The Emperor paused. Taemin waited, barely breathing. "But more than gratitude, you have earned something greater. You have shown us a truth we had forgotten." The throne room remained silent. As Emperor Thraxion rose from his seat, it was a significant gesture. Emperors did not stand for anyone except other emperors. The crowd whispered among themselves, confused and curious. Thraxion walked down the steps from his throne slowly. He was old, Taemin realized. Not just in years, but in the weight of centuries. The Emperor had ruled for 3,000 years. He had seen empires rise and fall. He had made decisions that affected trillions of lives. And now he was walking toward a human engineer with a battered toolbox. "For 12,000 years, the Valthrine have led this empire," Thraxion said. His voice carried to every corner of the room. "We have done so because we believed ourselves superior. Our technology was the most advanced. Our minds were the sharpest. Our way was the only correct way." The nobles shifted uncomfortably. This was not the speech they had expected. "We built our civilization on the foundation of perfection," the Emperor continued. "We created systems that could not fail, as long as they remained perfect. We designed our society to preserve this perfection across millennia, and we convinced ourselves that any species that could not match our perfection was inferior. Thraxion stopped directly in front of Taemin. The old emperor looked down at him with eyes that had witnessed the birth and death of stars. Then our perfect system failed, and a human fixed it by breaking all our rules. Someone in the crowd gasped. A noble voice called out, "Your Majesty, surely this was just luck, a fortunate accident." Thraxion turned to face the crowd. "Commander Velthus, step forward." The commander emerged from the crowd and knelt before the emperor. "I am here, Majesty. Tell the court what you witnessed." Velthus stood and faced the assembled nobles. "I watched the human engineer study our fusion matrix for days. I watched him create a solution that I had declared impossible, not through luck, but through understanding. He saw what we could not see because we were blinded by our own certainty." "And does his repair work?" the emperor asked. "Better than the original design, Majesty. The adaptive harmonics he introduced have improved efficiency by 4%. The crystal is self-repairing." "It is revolutionary." Murmurs spread through the crowd. 4% improvement over Valthrine design was unheard of. Another voice spoke up. It was Cathrix, the senior engineer who had confronted Taemin. "Your Majesty, even if this is true, it does not change the fact that Valthrine engineering is superior overall. One success does not erase 12,000 years of proven superiority." Thraxion looked at Cathrix for a long moment. "You are correct. One success proves nothing. Which is why I have spent the last 5 days investigating further." The emperor gestured, and a holographic display appeared in the center of the throne room. It showed data, statistics, and reports. "I ordered my researchers to examine humanity's technological history," Thraxion said. "What they found was fascinating. Humans have been in space for only 200 years. In that time, they have developed faster than light travel, fusion power, artificial gravity, and medical technology that rivals species who have been spacefaring for millennia." The display shifted, showing human ships and stations. But that is not the interesting part. The interesting part is how they did it. Humans build things that are designed to break and be repaired. They create systems that can tolerate imperfection. They innovate constantly because they accept that nothing they build will ever be perfect. Thraxion turned back to Taemin. "This is what we lost. Somewhere across 12,000 years of perfection, we forgot how to adapt. We forgot that the universe changes, and only those who can change with it survive." Jiwoo squeezed Taemin's hand. He could feel her shaking. This was bigger than just thanking him for a repair job. This was something else entirely. The emperor addressed the crowd again. "I have made a decision. Some of you will support it. Many of you will oppose it. But I have ruled this empire for 3,000 years, and I believe this decision is necessary for our survival." He raised his hand, and the entire throne room fell silent. "I hereby establish the Imperial Academy of Adaptive Engineering. It will be headquartered in human space, on the colony world of New Busan. Its purpose will be to teach every species in the empire the principles of adaptive problem-solving and innovative thinking." Shocked voices erupted throughout the room. Nobles shouted objections. Some military commanders looked pleased. Others looked horrified. Thraxion waited for the noise to die down, then continued. "Taemin of Humanity will serve as the Academy's first director. He will be given the rank of Imperial Engineer, a position that has not existed since the Empire's founding. He will have authority to recruit teachers and students from any species, and to develop curriculum as he sees fit." Taemin felt dizzy. This couldn't be real. He was just a repair station engineer. He fixed broken machines. He wasn't qualified to run an academy, but the Emperor wasn't finished. "Furthermore, I declare humanity to be a full technological partner of the Valthrine Empire. Human engineers will be integrated into our research and development programs at every level. They will work alongside Valthrine engineers as equals, sharing knowledge and expertise." The throne room exploded into chaos. Nobles were shouting. Military commanders argued with each other. Some people looked excited. Others looked furious. A powerful voice cut through the noise. "This is an outrage. It was High Noble Cerethix, one of the Empire's most influential leaders. Your Majesty, you cannot place humans on equal footing with Valthrine. They are a young species, barely evolved from primitives. This decision undermines 12,000 years of imperial tradition. Other voices joined in support. The humans will corrupt our technology. They will steal our secrets. This is an insult to every Valthrine who has served the Empire. Thraxion let them shout. He stood calmly, waiting. Finally, when the noise began to die down, he spoke again. I understand your concerns. Change is frightening, especially when it challenges everything we believe about ourselves. But I have seen something in these past days that troubles me more than change. He gestured to the display again. New data appeared, showing fleet readiness reports and technological assessments. For the past 500 years, our rate of innovation has been declining. We perfect what we have, but we create little that is truly new. Meanwhile, younger species are advancing rapidly, not just humans. The Krillians have developed new forms of bioengineering. The Thendorians have made breakthroughs in quantum mathematics. Even species we consider primitive are innovating in ways we have not. The Emperor's voice grew stern. If we continue on our current path, the Valthrine will become obsolete. Not destroyed, but irrelevant. Preserved in our perfection, like insects in amber. While the galaxy moves forward without us. High Noble Cerethix started to speak again, but Thraxion cut him off with a gesture. This is not a request. This is an imperial decree. The Academy will be built. Humanity will become our partner. Those who support this vision will be rewarded. Those who oppose it may resign their positions if they wish. But they will not prevent this change. The finality in his voice silenced all objections. An imperial decree was absolute. It could not be overturned except by another emperor. And Thraxion had no intention of stepping down. The emperor turned back to Taemin. Do you accept this responsibility? Taemin's mind was racing. This was insane. This was impossible. He wasn't qualified for this. But he looked at Haewon, who nodded encouragingly. He looked at Jiwoo, who smiled through her tears. He looked at Donghyun, who gave him a small, proud nod. Then he thought about all the engineers he had worked with over the years. All the people who were told they weren't good enough, weren't smart enough, weren't worthy of respect. All the humans who had proven themselves through hard work and creativity, only to be dismissed as lucky or primitive. This was bigger than him. This was an opportunity to change how the galaxy saw humanity. I accept, Your Majesty, Taemin said. His voice was quiet but steady. Thraxion smiled. It was the first time Taemin had seen the ancient emperor smile. Then, let it be known throughout the Empire. The age of isolated perfection is over. The age of collaborative innovation begins today. The emperor placed his hand on Taemin's shoulder. It was a gesture of respect, of partnership. Cameras recorded the moment. It would be broadcast across the entire galaxy. The human engineer and the ancient emperor, standing together. You fixed more than my flagship, Taemin, Thraxion said quietly, so only those nearby could hear. You fixed something I did not know was broken. You showed me that true strength comes not from standing above others, but from lifting them up to stand beside you. 1 year had passed since the Emperor's decree. Taemin stood on the observation deck of what used to be Repair Station 17 and looked out at the transformation below. New Busan had changed beyond recognition. The small colony world now hosted the Imperial Academy of Adaptive Engineering. The Academy campus sprawled across what had been empty plains. Buildings designed by architects from a dozen species blended Valthrine elegance with human practicality. Students from across the Empire filled the halls and workshops. Jiwoo walked up beside him and handed him a cup of coffee. Real coffee this time, imported from Earth. One of the benefits of humanity's new status in the Empire. Still can't believe this is real? She asked with a smile. Every single day, Taemin admitted. Sometimes I wake up thinking it was all a dream. Well, if it's a dream, don't wake up. We have 200 new students arriving next week. The academy had started small. Just 50 students in the first class. hand-picked from different species. Taemin had been terrified he would fail them, but Hee-won had been there to help, along with Dong-hyun, who had retired from the repair station to become an instructor. The curriculum was simple in concept but revolutionary in practice. Instead of teaching students what to think, they taught them how to think. Instead of perfect solutions, they explored good enough solutions. Instead of following rules, they learned when to break them. The results had been remarkable. A young Valthrine engineer named Sorix had taken Taemin's adaptive harmonics concept and applied it to shield generators. Imperial fleet shields were now 30% more efficient and could repair themselves during combat. The military had been skeptical at first, but after field tests proved the design worked, they had ordered retrofits for the entire fleet. A Krillian student named Veshla had combined human medical techniques with Krillian bioengineering to create a new type of healing gel. It could close wounds in minutes and prevent infections that previously required weeks of treatment. Hospitals across the Empire were requesting supplies. A Thendorian mathematician had used human game theory concepts to optimize trade routes. Shipping costs had dropped by 15% across 3 entire sectors. Every week brought new breakthroughs. Every month proved that the Emperor's vision was working, but it hadn't been easy. Opposition to the Academy remained strong among traditional Valthrine nobles. High Noble Serathix had resigned in protest, as had several other senior officials. They had been replaced by younger Valthrine who were more open to change, but the old guard still commanded significant influence. There had been incidents. A human instructor had been attacked by extremists who believed humanity was corrupting the Empire. The instructor survived, but the message was clear. Not everyone accepted the new order. The Emperor had responded swiftly and harshly. The attackers were arrested, and their supporters investigated. Thraxion made it clear that violence against Academy personnel would not be tolerated. The message had worked. There had been no more attacks. Taemin walked through the Academy's main workshop. It was his favorite place on campus. Here, students from different species worked side by side on projects that combined their unique approaches to engineering. He stopped to watch a mixed team working on a propulsion system. A Valthrine student was calculating quantum field equations. A human student was building a physical prototype. A Krillian student was testing bioorganic components. They were all contributing their strengths to solve a problem none of them could solve alone. This was what the Emperor had envisioned. Not humans replacing Valthrine, but everyone working together. "Director Taemin?" A voice called out. It was Sorix, the Valthrine engineer who had revolutionized shield technology. "Do you have a moment?" Quote, "Of course," Taemin said. They walked to a quiet corner of the workshop. Sorix looked nervous, his scales rippling with anxiety. "I wanted to thank you," Sorix said. "Before I came here, I was failing at the Imperial Engineering Academy. They said I asked too many questions, that I didn't respect traditional methods. They were going to expel me." Taemin nodded. He had heard similar stories from many students. The traditional academies had no patience for those who thought differently. "Then I came here," Sorix continued. "And you told me that questions were good. That challenging assumptions was how progress happened. You gave me permission to think the way I naturally think, and now my designs are being used throughout the fleet." "You did that yourself," Taemin said. "I just gave you space to work. That's my point," Sorix said. "You created a space where people like me can succeed, where being different is valued instead of punished. This academy isn't just teaching engineering, it's changing how the Empire thinks about innovation." After Sorix left, Taemin continued his walk through the campus. He passed classrooms where students debated solutions to complex problems. He saw workshops where impossible ideas were being tested. He watched as species that had never worked together before collaborated on projects that could change the galaxy. That evening, there was a ceremony. Commander Velthus had arrived from the capital with news. The Emperor was coming to visit the Academy personally. The visit was scheduled for the following week. The entire Academy went into preparation mode. Buildings were cleaned. Projects were reviewed. Students practiced presentations. Taemin was nervous. The Emperor had given him this incredible opportunity. What if Thraxion was disappointed with the results? What if the Academy wasn't living up to his vision? Ji-woo found him worrying in their quarters late at night. "Stop overthinking," she said. "You've built something amazing here. The Emperor will see that." "What if it's not enough?" Taemin asked. "It's never enough for you," Ji-woo said with affection. "You always think you can do better. That's why you're good at this. But sometimes, you need to step back and appreciate what you've accomplished." The day of the Emperor's visit arrived. Thraxion's ship landed in the Academy's main plaza. The entire student body was assembled to greet him. Taemin stood at the front with Hye-won and Dong-hyun beside him. The Emperor emerged from his ship looking exactly as Taemin remembered. Ancient, powerful, and impossibly wise. But there was something different about him now. He looked pleased. "Director Taemin," Thraxion said, "show me what you have built." They spent the day touring the Academy. The Emperor visited every department, spoke with students from different species, and examined their projects. He asked detailed questions and listened carefully to the answers. In the main workshop, he watched a demonstration of the new shield technology. In the medical facility, he saw the healing gel being applied to a training injury. In the mathematics department, he reviewed the trade route optimizations. At the end of the tour, Thraxion stood in the central courtyard and addressed the assembled students and faculty. "When I created this academy, many questioned my judgment. They said I was giving too much power to a young species. They said I was destroying traditions that had served the Empire well for millennia." The crowd was silent, listening. "I told them that tradition without adaptation becomes stagnation. I told them that true strength comes from embracing change, not resisting it. But even I did not fully understand what that would mean." Thraxion gestured to the campus around him. "This academy has exceeded my expectations in every way. In 1 year, you have produced innovations that our traditional academies did not achieve in centuries. You have proven that collaboration between species creates results that no single species could achieve alone." He looked directly at Taemin. "You have done more than teach engineering. You have taught the Empire how to evolve. For that, you have my deepest gratitude and respect." The Emperor spent the night on campus, dining with students and faculty. Taemin found himself sitting next to Thraxion at the head table. "Do you remember what you told me when I asked if you accepted the position?" the Emperor asked. "I said yes," Taemin replied uncertainly. Thraxion laughed, a sound Taemin had never heard from him before. "You said it so quietly I almost didn't hear you. You looked terrified." "I was terrified," Taemin admitted. "I still am sometimes." "Good," Thraxion said. "Fear keeps us humble. It reminds us that we don't have all the answers. That's something I forgot over the centuries. I became so certain of my superiority that I stopped questioning myself." The Emperor looked out at the students, from a dozen different species, all talking and laughing together. "You showed me that uncertainty can be a strength. That admitting you don't know everything is the first step to learning something new. That is a lesson every emperor should learn, but few ever do." 5 years after the Emperor's visit, the Academy had grown beyond anything Taemin had imagined. There were now 5 campuses across the Empire, each one teaching the principles of adaptive engineering to thousands of students. The impact on the Empire was undeniable. Innovation rates had increased dramatically. New technologies were being developed at a pace not seen in Valthrine history. Most importantly, the rigid barriers between species were breaking down. Taemin stood in his office, now decorated with gifts from grateful students and honors from various governments. On his desk was a photo from 5 years ago, him standing next to Emperor Thraxion after fixing the Eternal Dominion. He still had his old toolbox. It sat in the corner of his office, battered and worn. Sometimes students asked him why he kept it. He always told them the same thing. "It reminds me where I came from. It reminds me that the simplest tools, used with creativity and determination, can fix anything." Ji-woo called from the doorway. "Ready to go? The students are waiting." They walked together to the main auditorium. Today was graduation day for the 5th class of Academy students. Hundreds of engineers from dozens of species were receiving their certifications. As Taemin watched them accept their diplomas, he thought about how far they had all come. 5 years ago, he had been a simple repair station engineer. Now he was changing the galaxy, but in his heart, he was still that same engineer. Still the person who saw broken things and wanted to fix them. He had fixed a flagship, then he had helped fix an empire, and the galaxy would never be the same.